Father Carlo Viganò, who purports to be a retired archbishop in the Vatican II sect, has gained prominence in the past few years. He recently came out and said that Francis is a, quote, non-Catholic pope, end quote.
We have come to a point that even simple people with little knowledge of doctrinal issues understand that we have a non-Catholic pope, at least in strict sense of the term.
Well, that's impossible. You cannot have a non-Catholic pope. As St. Robert Bellarmine stated, quoting Melchior Cano, "It is inconceivable that someone is the head and pope who is not a member or a part," end quote. The idea that someone can be the head and pope of the Catholic Church when he is not a member or a part of it is so illogical that it's described here as not able to be conceived. It's impossible and contrary to reason. Thus, while Viganò correctly says that Francis is not Catholic, he incorrectly says that Francis is the Pope and that a non-Catholic can be Pope. The true conclusion, based firmly on Catholic teaching, is that a heretic such as Francis is not the Pope. He is rather a heretical anti-Pope. Pope Leo XIII also taught that it's absurd to imagine that he who is outside can command in the Church. The Catholic Church teaches that manifest heretics cannot be valid popes, and that heretics immediately lose membership in the Church if they ever had it. The Church teaches that anyone who preaches heresy notoriously, let me repeat that, anyone who preaches such heresy, cannot hold jurisdiction over the faithful. St. Robert Bellarmine, quote, "For that reason, Popes Celestine and Nicholas in the passages cited say that a heretical bishop from the time he began to preach heresies was not able to loose or bind anyone," end quote. This is based on the divine law as the Church teaches, and it applies to everyone. The reason for this, as St. Robert Bellarmine also pointed out, is, it would be the most miserable condition of the Church if she were compelled to recognize a wolf manifestly prowling for a shepherd. A wolf attacking the sheep with notoriously heretical preaching cannot hold authority over the flock, because the authority of Christ does not lead people to hell. Those who tell you to recognize a person like Francis as the Pope lead you to a wolf and contradict Catholic teaching. We cover this subject in detail in our video Great Proof Texts for Sedevacantism. The video references Pope St. Celestine, Pope Nicholas, and St. Robert Bellarmine, among others. Interestingly, we find the same teaching of the Catholic Church in the Catechism of St. Peter Canisius' 16th century Doctrine of the Church. He writes, quote, "We owe faith and obedience to those only who, being lawfully ordained and sent by bishops, profess the sound doctrine of the Church. But of others we must carefully beware, as of enemies and pestiferous persons," end quote. Notice, you only owe obedience to those people who, among other things, profess the sound doctrine of the Church. Does Francis profess the sound doctrine of the Church? Certainly not. This brings us to the next point. Viganò's statements supply more proof that Francis's imputability or guilt is publicly known, and therefore that Francis is a notorious heretic. In our video Great Proof Texts for Sedevacantism, we cover how there are two elements to notorious heresy in regard to notorious in fact, according to pre-Vatican II canonists. First, the heretical preaching must be public, and second, the imputability or guilt must be publicly known. Well, Francis preaches heresy publicly to the world on many issues, such as by declaring that it's a sin to try to convert people, that there are non-Catholic saints and martyrs, that the death penalty is contrary to the gospel, that Protestants and schismatics are inside the body of Christ, complete religious indifferentism, and much more.
Non è lecito convincere della tua fede. Il proselitismo è il veleno più forte contro il cammino ecumenico.
¿Voy a convencer a otro que se haga católico? No, no, no.
C'è un grosso peccato contro l'ecumenismo.
და არის ძალიან დიდი ცოდვა ეკუმენიზმის წინააღმდეგ.
Il proselitismo.
ამას ქვია პროზელიტიზმი.
Mai si deve fare proselitismo con gli ortodossi.
Io credo che le intenzioni di Martin Lutero non erano sbagliate e oggi luterani e cattolici, protestanti tutti, siamo d'accordo sulla dottrina della giustificazione. Su questo punto tanto importante lui non aveva sbagliato.
It's also a fact that Francis's imputability or guilt is publicly known because 1. He admits that his own teaching may be heresy and he doesn't care, proving that he's culpable.
Y me viene a la mente decir algo que
puede ser una insensatez. O quizás una herejía.
And 2, he denies truths of the faith that any adult Catholic, let alone a person who purports to be a bishop and the Pope, is bound to know. To preach a false gospel as he does is to render one's imputability public. Thus he is a notorious heretic. In great proof text for sedevacantism, we also quote pre-Vatican II canonist Father Eric Mackenzie, who correctly taught that a simple heretic, that is, a person who has not been canonically warned or declared against, and might even claim to be Catholic, can be a notorious heretic. Those who tell you that a person cannot be a notorious or manifest heretic until he or she has been canonically warned or declared or openly identifies him or herself as a non-Catholic are totally wrong. The simple heretic who has undergone no judicial process and might even claim to be Catholic can be a notorious heretic, as Francis certainly is. Now here is Viganò correctly stating, as if it's a well-known fact, that Francis deliberately opposes true Catholicism and deliberately promotes what is contrary to it.
Of a pope who does not believe like a pope, doesn't behave like a pope, does not speak like a pope. The problem is that we are not faced with a sort of inaction from the papacy, as could happen with a sick or very old pontiffs, but rather with a constant action that is organized and planned in a sense diametrically opposed to the very essence of the papacy. We have all understood that the reasons given by Bergoglio for declining a meeting with a prelate, a politician, or a conservative intellectual do not apply to the monastic cardinal, the heretic bishop, the abortionist politician, or the globalist intellectual. In short, there is a blatant difference in behavior from which one can grasp the partiality and partisanship of Francis in favor of any ideology, thought, project, scientific, artistic, or literary expression that is not Catholic.
This is further evidence of Francis's public imputability and therefore notorious heresy. As cited earlier, Viganò also said that, quote, even simple people with little knowledge of doctrinal issues can see that Francis is not Catholic.
We have come to a point that even simple people with little knowledge of doctrinal issues understand that we have a non-Catholic Pope.
As anyone can recognize, Francis is a notorious heretic who preaches blatant heresies regularly. Someone who preaches heresy notoriously as he does cannot hold authority or office in the Church, as we've shown. That person must not be considered the Pope or given obedience according to Catholic teaching, lest people are led to a wolf and an enemy. It is contrary to Catholic teaching to obstinately acknowledge a man like Francis as the Pope. Although people like Viganò, Taylor Marshall, and some others say some true things in criticism of what's happening, they lead people astray by giving them false conclusions that keep them inside the Vatican II sect under anti-Pope Francis. They keep people from recognizing the heart of what's really happening, which our material covers. As a further expression of his false position, Viganò describes Francis as both Pope and liquidator of the Catholic Church, who demolishes it with, quote, decrees.
His dual role as Pope and liquidator of the Catholic Church allows him, on one hand, to demolish it with decrees, an act of government, and on the other hand, to use the prestige of his office entails to establish and spread the new religion over the rubble of the old one.
But the Catholic Church cannot be liquidated or demolished, and certainly not by the decrees and acts of a valid Pope. The Church is indefectible. It is perpetually immune from error and heresy, as Pope Pius XI taught. Viganò's position is false. Francis is an anti-pope. Viganò also admits that Francis promotes a new religion. That statement is correct. The true Church still exists, but it's not the sect of anti-Pope Francis. The Vatican II sect is actually the whore of Babylon, the prophesied end-times counter-church. The current situation in Rome was predicted. See our video Apocalypse Now in the Vatican, among others. Also see our website, vaticancatholic.com, for information about how to be a true Catholic and save your soul.